So how does the United States follow the European model of colonization? Okay, we'll start with the 1890s. The United States declares war on Spain. Spain has occupied Cuba for many, many years. So we declare war on Spain, who is in Cuba. We are going to invade the Philippines, class. We're going to invade Puerto Rico. We're going to invade Cuba. Hey, it's working for the Europeans. Why not us? You'll find in the Spanish-American War that we fairly easily took Cuba away from Spain. And what else does Spain have that we can take? You know, Spain's down. While they're down, what can we do? We're easily going to annex their Puerto Rico colony. We are going to find a lot of resistance in the Philippine Islands. The Filipinos are going to resist annexation. Now listen, the Philippines had been occupied by Spain, remember, and they had launched a war of independence against first Spain and then the United States as we come in. But after 2 years of bitter, bloody fighting, it did become a colony. This war, the Philippine War, you don't hear a lot about it, but class, it was filled with atrocities. It was violent, it was brutal, it was horrific, and a lot of this was propelled by our idea of superiority over these people. Here's a quote from one of the generals, the United States generals, fighting in the war. "It may be necessary to kill half the Filipinos in order that the remaining half of the population may be advanced to a higher plane of life than their present semi-barbarous state affords." So we're looking at, we can kill half of their population in order to control the other half and assimilate and create a new identity for them. And we think it's better. We think it's more civilized. Cuba will resist our occupation. We've gotten rid of Spain. Cuba's going to resist us. So we will sign some sort of agreement with them, which will remain in place until Fidel Castro orchestrates the Cuban Revolution from the United States in the 1950s. So the United States is going to keep revising their expansionist model into one where these larger corporations with government support are going to aggressively intervene in affairs near and far. We're going to send troops to the Caribbean, Central America countries, with the goal of turning these regimes into dependent states. We topple regimes, we sponsor coups. It's a sad state of American politics. We were successful, and I use that term loosely, successful in some areas, class, but the United States claims to be a world power built on the foundation of freedom and equality. But who does this include and who does this leave out? Now, let's talk a minute about the second industrial revolution. It begins in the 1850s. The first one was in the 1700s. It will reorder global relations and relationships, and places like Japan, they're going to become industrialized and actually integrate into the worldwide economy. So places like Japan are going to militarize. They're going to take a look at Great Britain and say, hey, they're a small little island like us. We can do the same thing that they're doing. And sure enough, they began doing so and starting to make a mark in the world. These new technologies, materials, and business practices are all going to emerge about the same time. For example, what's pushing this? The invention and introduction of electricity. This will slash production costs. Y'all can't imagine life without electricity, can you? We're going to see cheaper made steel is essential for our shipbuilding, our Navy making, our railways, and those kinds of things. So it's going to strengthen the governments. And this second wave of industrial revolution is going to see these new business practices, for example, the creation of monopolies. Class, monopolies is on the rise worldwide. And, today we view monopolies as being a negative thing. But here we're going to see places in the United States like Standard Oil and the United States Steel Corporation. They're going to be more of that in the world, and it will continue to integrate inside world economies. So the second industrial revolution is really reinforcing economic power for America and European societies. But it's also going to do some other things. It's going to create labor demands. There's going to be vast movements of workers. Indians are going to be sent to sugar plantation and work on railroads in South and East Africa and Caribbean islands. The Chinese, they're going to come to the United States and work on railroads. They're also going to work on sugar plantations in Cuba. The Irish, the Poles, the Jews, Italians, Greeks, they're all going to flock to factory works in North America. They're going to pour into the United States. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Italians are going to move to Argentina for, wheat and corn harvesting. So we're going to see increasing integration and European expansion as they're becoming stronger and wealthier. What else is helping them? Steam-powered gunboats, new weapons. Weapons becomes very deadly during this time. The invention of machine guns is going to allow you to kill many people at one time. Instead of reloading your gun and shooting one person at a time, you can just mow down a whole crowd. So it's going to give a lot of power to certain groups of people. Again, railroads, but the telegraph. Cable technology is going to create quicker communication. So we don't have phones, but we have telegraphs, and that's going to be a really incredible invention. Class, the opening, though, of the Suez Canal is going to be something like nothing else. It's going to start something that scholars refer to as the scramble for Africa. It's going to allow for more efficient travel between Europe and Asia, and it's going to open up, as you can see from the map, where the Suez Canal is located at the top of Africa there, near Egypt. It's going to open up the interior of Africa. Now, until the 1800s, Europeans did not go inland inland of Africa. They stayed on the coast. They hugged on the coastline. But now we're going to see the start of occupation and colonization and imperialization attempts on Africa, and it's going to lead to so many unintended tragic consequences, class, for Africa that's still felt there today and in the world. Okay, let's talk a minute about this scramble for Africa and what it means. Now, in the late 19th century, these European rivalries, they're creating this frenzy of imperialism. We can't let anybody get ahead of us, and all these territorial conquests are going to take place, primarily in Africa, but also in Asia. Still, Africa is going to bear the brunt of European rivalries and imperialism. Europe is going to carve most of Africa into colonies in a short period of 30 years, partitioning the African landmass between major nations. People from Europe, nations from Europe, Germany, Great Britain, France, also from the United States, the Ottoman Empire, the Middle East wants their hand in Africa as well. So these new colonial boundaries that they're going to shape up, class, it's ignoring previous African states. It's ignoring previous ethnic, language, cultural, and commercial centers. It's tragic. This is going to cause so many problems later on. So many things are going to happen later on as a result of this restructuring Africa. So what are these motivations? The usual stuff, what do they have in Africa that we could use? But there was a great interest in Egypt and South Africa. There was this fantasy about great treasures locked in the interior. And European explorers and missionaries really excited readers with their accounts of Africa and its unlimited economic potential, like Dr. Stanley Livingstone. Dr. Livingstone, I presume, remember he disappeared in Africa and was found, and he wrote a lot of about the incredible things in Africa. But then we're going to see some true tragedies come out of this. People like King Leopold II of Belgium. He's going to colonize and brutalize the Congo Free State. It is horrific what happened there. You can read King Leopold's Ghost, A Story of Greed and Terror and Heroism in Colonial Africa. It's a book by Adam Hochschild. to learn more. But I also have a documentary in the class for you to read about this, and watch about this. It's very tragic, but it's an important story, I think. Now, remember Cecil Rhodes that I mentioned earlier? He's going to champion British imperialism in South Africa, and they're going to be a creation of some new states there. The Transvaal and the Orange Free State, those are two that we'll talk about in a minute, and the brutal development of the diamond trade in South Africa. So European civilizing missions, yes, we've got missionaries that are going to go ahead of our European armies to convert the souls to Christianity, but too often, there were accounts of them attempting to destroy indigenous culture in their efforts to save them. So, Africans, are they going to resist? Yes, a couple of different ways. Some will surrender and negotiate with the European involvement to limit their loss of autonomy. And then some are going to fight directly to preserve their independence. But unfortunately, a lot of Africans do not even understand European superior military technology. They've never even seen these, Europeans before, many of them. But in places like the Singhalese died in battles with the French in the 1880s, fighting, their attempts to infiltrate the interior and build railroads through their communities. So they were not successful. The Ethiopians, however, repulsed the Europeans by playing rivalries against each other, and they were able to get weapons from the French and the British. And they developed this well-equipped army, and at places like the Battle of Adwa in 1896, Ethiopia defeated the Italians. This is a well-celebrated moment in African history. So these colonization attempts led to European colonial administrations in Africa. Not a lot of Europeans moved into the area, but they have administrations. But the actual power is going to fall to kind of men on the spot, or military adventurers, or settlers, or entrepreneurs. And Europeans, they really wanted this African colonization to look like the British crown jewel of India. We're going to export raw materials, we're going to import manufactured goods. It never really looks like that. And remember, class, Africans never benefited from this exchange. They will pay a high cost in regard to loss of their social, economic, and political way of life. Still, by and far, the European colonial rule was fragile in Africa. It's going to rely on paid African military and police forces. But any way you look at it, the scramble for Africa leads to tumultuous times for those involved. As usual, class, keep in touch.